I watched my parents raise their glasses, their faces glowing with pride, not for me, but for my sister as they handed her $10 million. In that instant, the golden image of family shattered. They turned to me, their voices cold, telling me I no longer belonged in their home. My world collapsed, but I refused to break. What they didn't know was that betrayal has a way of sharpening the soul, and when the empire they built on lies began to crumble, the daughter they cast aside would hold the power to decide their fate. The chandeliers above shimmered like constellations trapped in glass, their light spilling over polished marble floors and gilded walls. Every guest in the grand hall wore their best evening attire, diamonds flashing, voices carrying the practiced laughter of the wealthy. To anyone stepping in from the outside, the scene was flawless, an American dream wrapped in crystal and champagne. I stood there in my satin dress, smiling on cue, nodding at familiar faces, pretending to belong. But beneath the careful makeup and rehearsed gestures, my heart was quiet, detached, watching the performance from a distance. The orchestra played a waltz, couples swirling across the floor as waiters glided between them with trays of wine. My parents stood near the center, the perfect hosts, admired for their generosity and elegance. Beside them, Sophia shone like the favored jewel she had always been. Her gown, custom-made from Paris, caught the light with every turn, and her laughter carried effortlessly, wrapping around the crowd. I lingered near the edge, raising my glass to my lips, tasting nothing but the bitterness of being invisible in the very home where I grew up. For years, I had been trained to maintain this illusion, the daughter who played her role quietly while Sophia dazzled. People always said we were lucky to have such close-knit parents, to live in such comfort. They never saw the subtle dismissals, the way my accomplishments were brushed aside while Sophia's smallest triumphs were celebrated. Tonight, though, the mask was about to slip, and the truth would be revealed not only to me, but to every soul in that golden cage of a ballroom. The music quieted. My father stepped forward, clinking his glass. The crowd hushed instantly. My mother's hand rested proudly on Sophia's shoulder as she guided her into the light. "Tonight," my father announced, his voice booming with pride, "we honor our beloved daughter Sophia. Her dedication, her brilliance, and her loyalty to our family deserve recognition beyond words." A murmur of admiration rippled through the guests. I held my breath, waiting, foolishly hoping he would acknowledge me too, even just a sentence, a glance. Instead, he reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a sleek, embossed folder. "It is with great pride," he continued, "that we present Sophia with a gift, an investment in her future." He opened the folder and held up the documents for all to see. $10 million. Applause exploded around me, thunderous and unrelenting. Cameras flashed, champagne glasses clinked. Sophia's eyes gleamed as she leaned into the spotlight, her lips parting in a practiced smile. My mother kissed her cheek, whispering words I couldn't hear but knew were dripping with approval. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. $10 million. The words repeated in my mind like a cruel echo. I forced my lips into a tight smile, though no one looked my way. My father's eyes swept over the room, passing over me as though I were nothing more than another guest, a shadow blending into the wallpaper. My stomach twisted, but I clutched my glass tighter, refusing to let my trembling show. The air grew thick, suffocating, and I felt the walls of the golden hall close in around me. Sophia accepted the folder with a graceful bow, turning to the guests with mock humility. She thanked them, thanked our parents, spoke of honoring the family legacy. Then, as the applause died down, she stepped toward me. Her perfume reached me first, sharp, floral, suffocating. She leaned in, her smile dazzling for the cameras still clicking around us. But her words, soft and venomous, sliced through me. "No one will remember you," she whispered. "Not tonight, not ever." The crowd roared again as my father raised his glass for another toast. Their laughter rang in my ears, louder than the orchestra, louder than the applause. I felt my body stiffen, my smile crack. The golden cage was crumbling, though no one else could see it. Only me. Only the daughter left in the shadows, listening to the cruelest truth of all, that in this family, I was already gone. The music resumed, lively and bright, as though nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. My eyes burned, not with tears, but with something sharper, something that refused to break. And as I glanced once more at Sophia, basking in the glow of our parents' love, I knew this night was not an ending. It was the beginning, the first fissure in the illusion, the first crack in the golden cage. And once a cage cracks, it can never hold forever. The storm rolled in quickly that night, as though the sky itself conspired with my parents to drive me out. After the party ended, I was summoned to my father's study. The grandeur of the room, with its mahogany shelves and oil portraits of ancestors, felt more like a courtroom than a sanctuary. My parents sat across from me, Sophia perched smugly at their side. My father's words were blunt, delivered without hesitation. "You don't belong here anymore, Ava. You've brought nothing but disappointment." My mother nodded, her silence sharper than any accusation. Sophia just smiled, watching me unravel. I tried to speak, to remind them of years I had devoted, of achievements they ignored, but the words caught in my throat. My father gestured toward the door. "Pack your things. Tonight." His tone left no room for argument. Sophia's smirk widened as she leaned back, crossing her legs with satisfaction. The air thickened, my chest tightened, and I felt as though the floor had given way beneath me. I stood, refusing to beg, though my knees nearly buckled. Gathering what dignity I had left, I walked out of the study, down the long hall lined with family portraits, where my image was conspicuously absent. By the time I reached the front gates, rain had begun to pour, soaking my dress and plastering my hair to my skin. The guards didn't meet my eyes as they swung the wrought iron gates open. My suitcase, hastily packed and half empty, felt like a coffin dragging behind me. When the gates closed with a slow, metallic groan, I turned just in time to see my reflection distorted in the wet iron. A trembling figure, drenched and abandoned, locked out of the only home she had ever known. The sound echoed like a final verdict, and I stood there shivering, clutching my suitcase, staring into the rain as if the storm could wash away the shame. The city swallowed me quickly. My savings were meager, barely enough for a small apartment in a part of town where the walls cracked and the heat sputtered in winter. The silence was brutal, pressing in from all sides. I spent days staring at peeling paint, the emptiness around me louder than any words my parents had said. I was gone from their world, erased as if I had never existed. Loneliness gnawed at me, but I refused to disappear. I needed something, anything, to remind myself I was still alive. That was when I turned to the glowing screen of my laptop. The internet became my only refuge, its endless scroll a distraction from the void. I stumbled into live streams, communities of people baring their souls in real time, their voices raw and unfiltered. For the first time, I felt a flicker of belonging, not in my own life, but in theirs. I created an anonymous account, typed words into chat boxes, listened to strangers who didn't know me but somehow understood loneliness. It was fragile, but it kept me breathing. Then came the poison. Late one night, I saw my sister's face trending across platforms. She had crafted a narrative, polished and perfect, telling the world that I had betrayed my family. In her version of the story, she was the devoted daughter, and I was the envious, ungrateful sibling who turned against the people who had given me everything. Her followers grew by the thousands, all praising her loyalty, all condemning me. Screenshots of her posts spread like wildfire, images of me taken at unflattering angles, clips twisted out of context. Ava the traitor. Ava the jealous. The words burned as I read them over and over. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the comments poured in, relentless, vicious. People I had never met spat venom into my inbox. Ungrateful. Pathetic. You should disappear. Each notification was another dagger, each message another reminder that Sophia's version of reality carried more weight than my truth. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but I knew no one would listen. Her story was too perfect, too convincing, and I had been erased from the family so cleanly that even strangers believed the lie. Nights grew darker. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the screen, reading the hatred until my chest ached and my hands shook. My reflection in the monitor was hollow, my eyes ringed with exhaustion, my face pale. The digital world that had once offered solace had turned into another cage, one even colder than the marble halls I had left behind. I realized I had traded one prison for another, the gilded cage for the glowing screen, and both had the same purpose, to remind me I was unwanted. Still, somewhere in the midst of the venom, I held on. The gates had closed, the storm had raged, and the world believed Sophia's lies. But as I stared into the glow of the monitor, a thought flickered like a faint spark. If stories could destroy me, maybe stories could also save me. And though my voice was drowned out now, silence would not last forever. The envelope arrived without warning, tucked beneath my apartment door like an afterthought. Its heavy cream paper, embossed with my family's crest, felt alien in my hands. For a moment, I wondered if it was some belated attempt at reconciliation, a sliver of acknowledgement that I still existed. My fingers trembled as I slid it open, heart pounding with a hope I didn't dare name. Inside, a stack of legal documents spilled into my lap. My eyes scanned the words, each line a dagger carving deeper into flesh. My name, once etched into the family trust, the estate, the inheritance, was gone, erased, clean as if I had never been born. The signatures at the bottom gleamed in black ink, my parents', Sophia's, the notary's, everyone but mine. The room spun. I gripped the papers, my knuckles white, the edges cutting into my palms. My breath grew ragged as I stared at the cold proof of abandonment. This wasn't just emotional exile, it was legal obliteration. My parents had gone beyond rejection. They had rewritten history, striking me out of the narrative of our family's wealth and legacy. Tears blurred the text, but I refused to let them fall. The camera of memory zoomed closer, capturing the glassy surface of my eyes as if the universe itself were recording my downfall. My reflection in the window stared back, hollow and betrayed, clutching the evidence of my erasure. I didn't remember leaving the apartment, but suddenly I was outside, clutching the papers to my chest as if they could still hold my identity together. The city's lights blurred into streaks, cars rushing past in a symphony of indifference. My legs carried me without thought, my mind a storm of voices. You were never enough. You don't belong. You are nothing. The papers slipped from my hands, scattering across the wet pavement, words smearing under raindrops. I sank to my knees, sobbing silently, my body convulsing with grief too deep for sound. Days bled together after that. I barely ate, barely slept, haunted by images of Sophia's smile as she accepted $10 million, my parents' proud faces as they struck me from existence. Shadows crept into every corner of my mind, whispering that perhaps Sophia was right, that no one would remember me, that I could vanish and the world would keep spinning. Despair wrapped its fingers around my throat, squeezing tighter with each breath. Then came the night of the accident. Sophia's name had been trending for weeks, every post glorifying her as the perfect daughter while I was dragged through digital mud. I had tried to disappear into the anonymity of the city streets, walking aimlessly beneath the glare of neon signs. That night, the air was thick with exhaust and the faint smell of liquor from the bars lining the avenue. I heard the screech of tires before I saw the car. Headlights bore down on me, blinding, unstoppable. I froze like prey caught in a predator's gaze. The car swerved at the last second, metal shrieking as it clipped the curb and spun out of control. I was thrown backward, my body crashing onto the pavement, the impact rattling my bones. Pain shot through me, sharp and immediate, but I was alive. Through the haze, I saw her. Sophia, behind the wheel, her face twisted in drunken panic before she sped away, tires screeching into the night. For a fleeting second I thought she might stop, might acknowledge what she had done. But she vanished, leaving me broken on the asphalt. The sirens came later, red and blue lights painting the darkness. Strangers gathered, voices muffled, pointing, whispering. Paramedics lifted me onto a stretcher, my body limp but my mind burning with disbelief. I tried to speak her name, to tell them who was responsible, but the words tangled in my throat. By the time I reached the hospital, the story had already spread, twisted beyond recognition. The headlines hit like another blow. Ava stages accident for attention. Estranged daughter seeks pity with reckless stunt. The photographs were merciless. My body on the pavement, face pale, eyes closed, paired with captions painting me as a manipulator desperate for relevance. The article quoted anonymous family sources, confirming I had always been unstable, prone to dramatic gestures. My parents' silence spoke louder than words, their absence an implicit agreement with the narrative. Sophia, meanwhile, posted a carefully crafted message of concern, her words dripping with false sincerity. The world applauded her grace while condemning me as a fraud. I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, an IV dripping life back into my veins. The room smelled of antiseptic, the air heavy with the weight of injustice. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one a reminder that I had survived. But for what? To be painted as the villain in a story I never wrote? To be crushed beneath the lies of the very people who should have protected me? The walls closed in, the monitors beeped, and the poison spread further, seeping into every corner of my existence. They had taken my home, my name, my inheritance, and now even my truth. I was drowning in shadows, the world convinced I was the architect of my own ruin. Yet, deep in the hollow of despair, a spark flickered. If they could twist the story to destroy me, then perhaps I could twist it back. The thought was faint, fragile, but it pulsed with possibility. And as the darkness pressed down, I clung to that spark, knowing that this was not the end. Not yet. The hospital discharged me with bruises, fractured ribs, and a heart weighed down by betrayal. I wandered through the days in a haze, a ghost in my own life. Then one evening, as I scrolled through endless feeds of lies about me, I stumbled upon a post that felt like a lifeline. It was a forum for people estranged from toxic families, survivors of homes that looked perfect on the outside but rotted on the inside. Out of desperation, I clicked join. The first meeting was virtual. Faces appeared in tiny boxes, strangers scattered across the country, each carrying a story of wounds invisible to the world. They spoke of favoritism, manipulation, being scapegoated until they broke. Every word was a mirror. I sat silent, tears pooling, until one woman leaned close to her camera and said, "You've never had a real family, and that's not your fault." The sentence pierced me, slicing through years of denial. My eyes lifted, and for the first time, something inside shifted. The camera might as well have zoomed in, capturing the flicker of clarity in my gaze. My parents had not abandoned me. They had never truly claimed me. That night, I stared at my reflection, bruises still visible, and whispered the truth aloud. I was never theirs. The words were both wound and freedom, and from that rawness, anger bloomed. Not the helpless fury that ate me alive, but a sharp, righteous fire. If they had rewritten the story to destroy me, then I would write one they couldn't erase. I began small. I created a channel under my own name, no longer hiding behind anonymity. I told fragments of my story, not polished or dramatic, just honest. People listened. Some scoffed, but others leaned in, recognizing themselves in my words. Slowly, a community formed, not just followers, but survivors who had their own scars. We built something together, a sanctuary where truth outweighed pretense. Their messages poured in, fueling me, reminding me that my pain had purpose. But I knew stories alone wouldn't dismantle the empire my family had built. I needed proof. So I started digging. Late nights bled into dawn as I combed through public records, corporate filings, anything connected to my parents' wealth. I traced shell companies, fake charities, properties purchased under pseudonyms. Patterns emerged like cracks in marble. And then I found it. The money. The $10 million they had paraded so proudly at the gala wasn't a gift of love. It was a transfer buried in a labyrinth of accounts, laundered through shady investments linked to offshore banks. My sister hadn't been rewarded for loyalty. She had been made the face of their corruption. The discovery made my hands tremble. Sophia's smug smile, my father's booming voice, my mother's silence, all of it tainted with criminal rot. They hadn't just erased me. They had built their empire on deceit, dressing it up as legacy while poisoning everything it touched. My heart pounded with exhilaration and fear. The power in my hands was dangerous, a weapon sharp enough to cut through their lies. But it was also a risk. If I used it recklessly, they would bury me deeper than before. I confided in the survivors group, carefully at first, then with growing confidence. They reminded me of something vital. Revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reclaiming power. Make them choke on their own lies, one said. Turn their weapons against them. Their words echoed in my mind as I crafted a plan. No more silence, no more shadows. I would not scream into the void this time. I would make the world listen. Every night, I tested my voice in front of the camera, refining my message. I gathered screenshots, documents, whispers from former employees brave enough to speak. The evidence stacked higher until it became undeniable, a tower built on their own deceit. And still, I waited, patient as fire smoldering under ash. Timing mattered. One misstep, and they would crush me with their influence. But if I struck at the right moment, the illusion of the golden cage would collapse in full view of everyone who once applauded their perfection. The night before I was ready to act, I returned to that forum meeting. The same woman who had told me I'd never had a real family looked at me through her screen and smiled. "You're not broken," she said softly. "You're awake." Her words settled into me like armor. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the survivor with the truth in her hands, ready to burn away the rot. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. The city lights flickered against the dark sky, alive with possibility. My chest rose with a breath that felt different, steady, deliberate, filled with something I hadn't felt in months. Resolve. Tomorrow, the phoenix would spread its wings, and when it rose, the flames would leave nothing of the lies that had once bound me. The night I chose to go live, the city outside my window buzzed like it always did, horns blaring, neon signs flickering. But inside my apartment, the air was charged, brittle with anticipation. My laptop camera glowed red, a tiny eye watching me as I leaned closer, my palms sweating despite the cool draft slipping through the cracked window. I had rehearsed this moment for weeks, every word etched into my bones. Tonight, I wouldn't just tell my story, I would prove it. The counter ticked upward. 500, 1,000, 5,000 viewers. Comments scrolled past in a blur, half taunts, half support, but I focused on my breathing, steady, deliberate. For years, I began, my voice steady though my hands trembled. I was erased by the very people who were supposed to protect me. My family built their empire on lies, and tonight, you'll see the truth for yourselves. I held up the first document, the camera catching every signature, every date. Evidence of laundering, the same money dressed up as Sophia's inheritance. The chat erupted, a storm of disbelief and shock. I leaned in, ready to drop the heaviest proof. And then, suddenly, the screen flickered. My image froze mid-sentence. The comments turned frantic. "What happened? She's gone!" A black overlay spread across my stream, blocking everything. Panic surged. I fumbled with the controls, but the broadcast was hijacked. For a split second, a new message flashed across the screen in bold white letters. "Stop, or you'll regret it." Then silence. The feed went dark. My heart hammered as I stared at the dead screen. Who had the power to do this? My family's influence reached further than I had dared to imagine. They had tried to silence me again. I sat frozen in the glow of the blank monitor, the weight of thousands of eyes pressing against me even in absence. For a moment, despair threatened to swallow me whole. But then I saw my reflection in the dark screen, my own eyes glaring back, not broken this time, but furious. I restarted the stream. My face reappeared, pale but defiant. "They don't want you to hear this," I said, my voice cracking into steel. "But I won't be silenced." The numbers surged again, viewers doubling, tripling, drawn in by the glitch, the drama, the fight. The hack had backfired. It had made them hungrier for the truth. Before I could show the rest of the evidence, my phone buzzed. A private number. Against my better judgment, I answered. My parents' voices came through, strained, urgent. "Ava, listen to us," my father began, his tone dripping with false concern. My mother's voice overlapped his, trembling but calculating. "We need your help. The authorities are circling. The assets are at risk. If you come forward as the rightful heir, if you stand with us, we can save everything. It's your chance to return, to restore what was lost." I almost laughed. Restore? They weren't begging for forgiveness. They were bargaining with desperation, dangling the illusion of belonging once more. And beneath their words, I caught the truth. They needed me, not as a daughter, but as a name, a legal loophole to scrub their sins clean. Sophia's silence on the line spoke louder than any plea. I imagined her, pacing with rage, watching her empire slip through her fingers. "Let me understand," I said slowly, lowering my voice though my camera was still running. "You want me to claim their money, to launder it in my name, so that when the investigation closes, you walk free?" My father hesitated, then sighed. "It's the only way, Ava. You owe this family." That word, owe, snapped something inside me. They had stolen my childhood, erased me from their will, painted me as insane, and now they dared to say I owed them? What they didn't realize was that my phone was connected to the stream. Every word, every plea, every desperate calculation was being broadcast live. The viewers heard it all, their manipulation, their hypocrisy, their willingness to sacrifice me again. The comments exploded. "They're using you. Exposed. This is the proof." I sat back, letting their own voices condemn them. It was better than any evidence I could have presented. On the other end, my parents faltered as they realized what I had done. "Ava, turn it off," my mother begged, her voice cracking. "Please, don't do this to us." Sophia finally spoke, venom dripping. "You'll regret this. You think the world cares? They'll eat you alive." I looked straight into the camera, my face lit with a calm fire. "I already survived your worst. The world can't hurt me more than you did." And then I hung up, their silence cutting off like a severed cord. The live stream continued for another hour as I unveiled the rest of the documents, answering questions, guiding viewers through the maze of lies. By the time I ended the broadcast, the truth was no longer mine alone. It belonged to thousands. The golden cage had cracked wide open, and the poison inside was spilling into daylight. As I shut the laptop, exhaustion and exhilaration tangled in my veins. Outside, the city still buzzed, oblivious to the reckoning that had begun. But I knew the storm was coming, and this time, I was ready to face it. The storm I had unleashed spread faster than I ever imagined. Within days, mainstream outlets picked up the live stream, headlines flashing across every screen. Heiress exposes family fortune built on fraud. What once felt like my private shame was now public scandal, dissected on talk shows, debated in articles, whispered about in cafes. Strangers stopped me on the street, some to offer sympathy, others just hungry for gossip. The gilded image my parents had cultivated for decades cracked open under the weight of truth, and from the fractures spilled rot everyone could smell. Authorities moved quickly. Investigators subpoenaed records, froze accounts, seized properties. Sophia, once radiant on magazine covers, now trudged into courtrooms under flashing cameras, her designer suits doing nothing to disguise the fear etched into her face. My parents sat beside her, their shoulders hunched, their arrogance deflated. I attended the trial only once, my presence unnecessary but irresistible. As testimony unfolded, as evidence mounted, I watched Sophia bite her lip until it bled. For a fleeting moment, I almost pitied her. But then she turned and our eyes locked. The cameras captured it, the tears streaming down her cheeks, the hatred blazing in her stare. It was a look that said she would never forgive me for surviving, for rising where she fell. That image became iconic, replayed endlessly, Sophia weeping, her empire burning, her fury aimed squarely at me. A micro cliffhanger etched into public memory, leaving everyone wondering if she would ever crawl back or strike again. But vengeance, I realized, was no longer my language. Watching them unravel in that courtroom, stripped of power and pretense, I understood something vital. I didn't need their ruin to heal. Their destruction was simply the echo of their choices, the natural justice of consequences catching up. My true reckoning was not in seeing them fall. It was in choosing how I would rise. So I wrote. Late nights in my apartment turned into dawns filled with words. I traced every scar, every betrayal, every crack in the golden illusion, shaping it into a story that wasn't just mine, but belonged to anyone who had ever been silenced. The book poured out of me like confession and resurrection all at once. I didn't polish away the pain. I let it stand raw and jagged, proof that I had lived through the fire. Publishers clamored for it before I even finished the manuscript. When it finally hit shelves, it wasn't just a memoir. It was a manifesto for the forgotten. The book tour was surreal. Crowds gathered in bookstores, clutching copies with my name on the cover, eager not for scandal but for connection. I signed page after page, each signature a small reclaiming of identity once erased. The faces blurred until one evening, in a quiet shop tucked away from the city's glare, a young woman approached. She couldn't have been more than 20, her hands trembling as she held the book to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes as she leaned close and whispered, "You saved my life." My pen froze mid-air. She explained, voice breaking, how my words had given her the courage to walk away from her own toxic family, how she finally believed freedom was possible. In that moment, the weight of everything I had endured shifted. The lies, the rejection, the accident, the ridicule. It had all carved a path to this, to touching a stranger's life in a way my parents never could. My throat tightened, but I smiled, squeezing her hand. "No," I whispered back. "You saved yourself." She cried harder, and the room blurred around us, the cameras flashing, the line of readers waiting. For me, time stopped. That was the twist I hadn't expected. My survival was never about revenge. It was about lighting a torch so others could see through their own darkness. When the signing ended, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky painted with the last hues of sunset. I inhaled deeply, the city humming around me, not as a cage, but as an open horizon. My past was still there, etched into me, but it no longer defined me. I had been erased, yes, but I had rewritten myself into existence, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the scapegoat, but as a woman reborn, carrying her scars like wings. I walked down the street, blending into the crowd, free at last from the weight of their names. The story wasn't over, it never would be, but it was mine now, and that was enough.